Okay, good morning everyone. We're here today to learn about three Melachos of Shabbos. The Melachos of Zoreah, Choresh, and Kotzer. Zoreah, Choresh, and Kotzer. Does anyone know anything about any of these three Melachot? Let's take Zoreah. Does anybody know what that means? Does anybody know what that means? Zoreah, the Melach of Zoreah. Give me a word, what it means. Zoreah.
Planting.
Planting. Very good, Morty. Planting. Okay, Choresh. Choresh. Does anybody know what Choresh means?
Plowing.
Plowing, good. And Kotzer. Does anybody know what Kotzer means? Kotzer.
Harvesting.
Cutting, harvesting. Very good, guys. Very good. Cutting, harvesting. Okay, now, I want you guys to put your thinking yarmulkes on your head and tell me, what do you think these three things have in common?
They are part of the 39 Melachot.
Very good. Well, that we know. That we know.
Related to the...
What do these
plants.
particular three Melachot have to do in common with each other?
They're all something to do with planting. I'm saying they all have to do with plants.
Okay, plants and planting. What would this one have to do with planting? Because you're cutting off plants, right? What kind of cutting do you have to do in order for this melacha to be asur? You have to cut what kind of thing?
Plant, living plant.
Living plant, right? Okay, very good. So that's what they might all have in common. They're all living. Now, I'm going to take, before we learn what we're going to do today is we're going to all go into the little pieces of Gemara with Rashi. We're going to split up into groups, and you're all going to learn the little part of Gemara with Rashi to come up with a definition of each one of these melachot. When you come up with a definition, your group is going to come up to the board, and we're going to compare your definition to the halachot of that melacha. So you're going to say, the definition of Zoreah is this. This is the exact definition. Then we're going to see, okay, well, do these halachot of Zoreah that are asur make sense? And you're going to have to say, well, my definition, I guess, is not exact because it doesn't really fit with all these cases that come after it. So you're going to have to fix the definition. Maybe go back to the Gemara. Okay, that's what we're going to do. What we're going to try to do today is just come up with a working definition. A working definition. We're going to split up in groups. All the groups are going to learn for 15 minutes to pick out the definition from the Gemara and the Rashi. Each group is going to share their definition on the board, and the other groups are going to be able to comment to see if they like the definition or not based on the categories that we're going to see. And then we're going to have one small little question at the end to see if everybody understood what's going on, and then we're finished for today. Okay? Good.
Okay.
Now, before we get there, I have a question that's just to get you guys thinking. The question I have for you guys is the following. Is it possible to make something grow, but not from the ground? Is it possible to have a plant growing, but not from the ground?
Yeah.
Should I say that in Spanish?
Well, it depends.
Yeah.
It depends. Okay.
What's
Fine.
your definition of ground? Maybe you don't consider it a ground if it is some soil that you put somewhere.
Excellent. Excellent, Don. What is ground? Okay. What is the ground? What else? Is it possible, what you were saying, is it possible to grow something from something that's not, let's say, the traditional ground?
Yeah.
What?
Like there's kinds of growing that are water or plain water or.
Well, you know what that's called?
Spanish.
You know what that's called in Spanish, in English? It's called hydroponic growing. Hydroponic. Hydroponic. Hydro means water, and ponic means planting. So hydroponic planting is something that you grow but it's not in the ground, not a traditional ground that we would consider ground. Now, why am I asking you about this? Why am I asking you about this?
Maybe planting wouldn't necessarily be.
Right.
Maybe you could plant in a pot.
Right, exactly. All these malachot that you said had to do with living plants that grow from the ground. What about these halachot of Shabbat when it comes to planting, plowing, or cutting or harvesting with plants that are not necessarily planted in the ground, in the earth, what we call earth? So in order to get into that question, it will give us like an interesting angle about all these halachot that we're going to learn. We're going to show you a little bit of a video. Okay? So, now that we've seen the video, I want you to keep what you've seen in mind about the basic difference between a hydroponic plant and a regular plant. What's the basic difference between a hydroponic plant and a regular plant?
One is not growing from the ground and one is.
Right. One is not growing from the ground, it's just in the water, right? And one is actually in the earth. Okay? So now what we're going to do is, we're going to go to the Gemara on Ayin Gimel and Beis. We're going to split up the chavrusas that we've already discussed before which your chavrusas are. And you're going to break up in 2, 2, and 2, and see the Gemara with Rashi. And you're going to come up with a definition of each malacha that you have. You guys are Zoreya, you guys are Choresh, and you guys are Kotzer. Okay?
Escuché que en este caso se aplicaría así sería. Después vamos a salir a tratar de la mañana. Dale, entonces dice que Zorea en todo caso en el que sea un beneficio para la planta, sea plantarla o podar o cualquier otra acción que sea beneficiosa para la planta.
Zorea is to plant or any other thing that benefits the growth. Okay, growth of a plant. Right, okay, that's good. Anybody have any questions about that?
Yeah.
Yeah, more.
What if you take the tip of the tree and you put it in the ground so a new tree would sprout? Would that be counted as planting?
Yeah, that goes in the category of planting because you're creating a new plant.
Is that Mavrich, Markiv there on the bottom? That's
Yeah, it's
Mavrich.
Mavrich.
Okay, Mavrich and Markiv. Very good. So we have a definition. Zoreya is benefiting the growth of the plant. Would that explain this also? Zomer is what? Zomer is podar, which is...
Zomer, you taking parts of the plant for it to grow better.
So even though you're cutting the plant, which is what? Podar, which is what? Pruning. Even though you're cutting the plant, you're still...
Planting
You're
because
still
you're
making
making it to grow better.
Okay, great.
So it goes in the category of Zorea.
Done. And Yossi are putting on what Choresh is. It's not going to be just plowing. What is it going to be? What do you guys learned already? Choresh is?
Choresh is like preparing the soil for it to be more suitable for the growth of the plant.
Very good, very good. So while he's writing that on the board, well, let's look at the case that's underneath it. That was in the Gemara. Gav shushit v'napla. If you're in a field and there's a mound, remember, Gav shushit is a mound. So if you take that mound off, you're not necessarily making a hole. You're just making the ground flat. So would that be considered choresh?
Yeah.
Because why?
You're preparing the soil.
Right, because you're preparing the ground to be better for the growth of plants. Okay? So it's not just plowing. If you just translate the word choresh, you think it's just plowing.
Yeah.
Alright, it's not just plowing. It's about making the ground better for the growth of plants. Okay, very good, guys. Excellent. Okay, next group. Kotzer. What they discovered is that it's what? Cutting
A plant
a plant
from its life source
filling a plant from its life source?
Because you want it.
Ah. So who can tell me why Morty and Bencha said this last part? If I would take this part out, because you want it, what would it be?
Zorea, without
Well, maybe. If I
yeah.
cut a plant from its life source, but I don't want it, that's what the case of the Gemara over here said, then it's not going to be the definition of kotzer. Kotzer is you have to want what you're cutting off. If you don't want what you're cutting off, then it'll probably be not the definition of kotzer. Okay, that's what Tosfos explains. Okay, very good. So now we have the definitions that you guys discovered about Zorea, Choresh, and Kotzer. Now what's left for us to discover is, what do you guys now think about hydroponics that you saw the video about? What do you think in all these cases is going to be the halach of hydroponics when it comes to Zorea, Choresh, and Kotzer? But before I ask that, let me ask you another question about hydroponics. What do you think a hydroponic plant will be? What kind of other changes or differences will there might be in the Torah about a hydroponic plant? Think out of the box for a second. Think out of the box. A hydroponic plant.
Watering.
What other halacha in the Torah might it affect? Watering.
Feeding the plant. That's also Zorea.
Feeding it on Shabbos?
Yeah.
I mean watering the plant on Shabbos.
Right, because you're feeding it. Which would
Okay,
also
so
be
that would be
Zorea.
Zorea. But besides Shabbos, what would a hydroponic plant, other halacha that it might affect in the Torah?
Kashrut? No.
Rishut?
Kashrut.
What kind of kashrut? I mean, not exactly like the kind of kashrut that we think of, but what kind of kashrut? Something that has to do with eating it,
Shemitah.
right? Shemitah or maaser.
Right.
Is this considered something that really grows from the ground and it has the halacha of shemitah and maaser? What? Very good. Bracha. What bracha do you make on a hydroponic plant?
Yeah.
Oh, it's never Priyadama.
What
It's
bracha?
not from
Right, let's say it's chas.
on the ground.
Or Be'epreitz, or maybe what else?
Shakol.
Shakol. Maybe make a shakol on a lettuce. That would be awesome. Shakol on a lettuce. Okay, so this is a very big machloket poskim. Some poskim say you actually make a shakol on hydroponic lettuce, or fruits, or vegetables. Some physicians say you make a hadam or ha'etz. But the question we want to discover over here is, what is going to be the halacha when it comes to Shabbat? So before we go from class today, I'm going to ask you two questions. Okay? I want you guys to take out a piece of paper. And on the piece of paper, I'm going to erase this here. On the piece of paper, I want you in your own words to write what the definition is of the three malachot. And I want you to write what is your opinion about whether these three malachot apply to hydroponic plants. Okay? And after you finish filling them out, you'll hand them in to me, and then we'll call it a day. Okay? Great. You guys were great.
Ahora tenemos que hacer el ejercicio.
Siempre con las
That's it.
señales así como